There's a reason why Uncharted 4 is labeled as an action-adventure platformer, or why The Witness is labeled as a puzzler other than just categorization. What makes each of these games fall into their specific genres is a balance of mechanics. Every game is a balance, even if you don't see it. It's management 101. With a team of creators, you have to focus on what you want. You can't be equally focusing on every mechanic or every aspect of the game equally. It's just not reasonable or efficient. Look at Halo 3. Of course, it's focused on its shooting mechanics and gameplay, but the game is much more than that. It has vehicle sections, traversal, and a freaking level creator. But does that make the game a racer or a game creator? No, of course not. That's silly, because while those parts of the game are serviceable and fun, they aren't the focus at all. They're a part of the game that adds to its quality, but doesn't necessarily define it. Skyrim is an action RPG, but it has thievery, horses, an economy, a massive open world, and stealth, but none of those things necessarily define it either. Those are just some additives to what actually defines the game, its RPG mechanics and combat. But I want to focus on one of those many additive mechanics that I just mentioned are in Skyrim. Stealth. Stealth games have had a specific balance of mechanics that have dramatically changed since their conception and up until now. About some of the greatest stealth games of all time, Splinter Cell Chaos Theory might come to mind. That game is purely stealth. There are not many other words that you can use to describe that game in its full. Sure, you might have an assault rifle to shoot all the foreign goons you want, but those mechanics for the gun are so horrendously created. Shooting feels intentionally unnatural, but sneaking up on a dude feels so right, because that's the predetermined balance. Stealth is the main mechanic in that game, and anything else that doesn't directly feed right back into the stealth mechanic is severely less fleshed out. I mean, let's say that the shooting mechanics were fleshed out, right? That would hurt the stealth mechanics, because that means that people can just play the game as a shooter. See, this is all one big connected chain. There was a general shared fear of diluting the stealth base by adding any other fleshed out mechanics. Now keep that in mind and let's fast forward a bit. 2016, what is that balance looking like? Well, for the few stealth games that are still around, stealth, action, and level design are all equally focused on. Modern day stealth isn't necessarily about forcing the hand of the player down the sneaky path. It's about choice. That's been the big marketing push behind these games. Hitman focuses on large open environments that allow you to choose your way. Metal Gear Solid 5 is as much action as it is stealth. The same can go for games like Deus Ex or Splinter Cell Blacklist. The balance of these mechanics has evolved into something less niche. No longer are the days of stealth being purely focused on sneaking up on fools and interrogating them with witty banter.
Bad news. I know it! I know there were ninjas here! What?
Now we have a genre that is realizing that focusing on just purely one mechanic is hurting the marketability, but also the variety. For example, if a new Metal Gear game were like the older ones, it'd be slow, methodical, and obtuse. Well, then the amount of people who would even try out that game dwindles dramatically, and you wouldn't get sales like the 6 million plus Metal Gear Solid 5 has. So the stealth genre slowly started to realize this. Whether it's just the bottom dollar or feeling a creative pull, the genre swayed. Slowly but surely, these games, at least in the AAA atmosphere, became more and more open to other playstyles. With stealth games being more and more open to other playstyles, the negatives were completely obvious. The stealth suffered. With seeing through walls and mark and execute systems becoming more commonplace, stealth was diluted. Pure patient stealth as we were used to was now dissipated, and every single movement was sped up. Instead of spending dozens of minutes scoping out a place and figuring out what to do, games took a more of a run and stab aesthetic, if you will. Or at the very least, became a sped up ghost of what they used to be. But the positives weren't apparent. They took a long time for a lot of people to accept. In my opinion, the games became a lot more immediate fun. Conviction was like the first real game to pick up this new generation of stealth. While it was a far cry from Chaos Theory, it was a lot more fun. Immediately you're jumping over obstacles, you're punching people in the face, you're tagging and marking and executing people, and you're having dynamic interrogations. For the first time in a Splinter Cell series, you felt like a badass. You felt like the badass that everyone in Splinter Cell lore has been talking about, but now it's fully realized in a video game.
Madam President, are you alright?
Instead of feeling like a vulnerable yet super brilliant spy, you felt like just a badass that was jumping over things and shooting people. When I first started playing it, it felt wrong. but the more and more I played it, the more and more it grew on me as something different. But eventually stealth started to find itself a bit of a happy middle ground. Let's go back to Metal Gear Solid 5. That's a game that's been under controversy for years now, but the game itself is a great mixture of pure action and stealth. It allows you as a player to choose the way that you want to play the game. You can absolutely go through the entire game as a full-on murderous Rambo style, but you can also go through a good chunk of the game as true stealth. But like most people playing the game, you'll probably mix both of these ideas together to create something different. Maybe you see a goon, stealthily take him out, but then since you get spotted, now you have to take out your machine gun and mow down a few guys. You don't have to restart the level every time, you don't feel guilty, it feels just natural. It allows the player to engage in emergent gameplay possibilities more frequently than any other game in the franchise. Whether you want to go through the entire game without killing a main guard or mow down as many people as possible, the game allows you to do both extremes. It's kind of brilliant when you think about it. Studios are allowed to have their cake and eat it too. They can create a beautifully rich action game, have a bunch of people come in to center it, and then make the game being able to be played multiple different ways, whether that be stealth or action or a little bit of both. Developers can also add more unique and different objectives for the stealth players to satiate their hunger, just like non-lethal takedowns. Non-lethal takedowns have been a focal point of modern stealth games for a while now. Look at Dishonored. It's a stealth game, but one that allows you to play it your way. Sounds familiar? But the entire game can be played without killing a single person. It's an idea that challenges what the player and designers can do. But when playing Dishonored, I realized just how far stealth has come in video games. Sure, stealth is much different than it used to be. That's just a fact. But what it has become nowadays is something so special and interesting. I don't feel like true modern day stealth with obtuse gameplay and slow as hell repetitive NPCs will make a comeback. Unless a Kickstarter team creates one or one of the many passionate indie devs will bring it back. It's just not financially viable in a AAA marketplace. But the way that stealth has progressed and morphed is almost perfect. Sure, it's had a bumpy road, but stealth has become an idea more than anything. It's become a platform to test and challenge players. You're inherently at a disadvantage. That's what's so amazing about these games. You have to overcome all of the obstacles with just pure wit and a few guns. Even if you can shoot down a bunch of dudes in some of these games now, the idea still stands. Stealth is all about fighting against the odds in a unique way. And even if that balance of mechanics has changed, stealth isn't dead. It's just evolved. I mean, look at games like Batman Arkham Asylum, a game about Batman that is as much stealth as it is combat. Look at Ghost Recon Wildlands, a massive co-op shooter that is touting and pushing stealth as a mechanic, as well as Watch Dogs 2. The paradigm is completely shifting towards games becoming more and more invested in not only these large worlds, but inside of these worlds allowing players to play the game the way that they want. Of course, Watch Dogs is never going to be a Splinter Cell, and you probably can't play the whole game as a stealth adventure anyhow. But the fact that this is a major part of its marketing push shows something. That balance of ideas has more and more become balanced. We're getting games that aren't necessarily all stealth or all action, they're a bit of everything. And for the first time, those games with a bit of everything are trying harder and harder not to force you down one path. Action was invading stealth, but now, stealth is sort of invading everything. Stealth is a major mechanic in video games, and it's gonna continue to grow, whether it's in its own game or in a AAA action fest. The mechanic will grow, and so will the genre, especially in the indie scene where pure stealth has found a ton of major development and success. Hell, even Uncharted 4 has major stealth sequences. So, what is the state of stealth? It's pretty damn good. But I mean, we still haven't had a Splinter Cell game in like 3 years, so what's even the point, right?